myths. When I did my training initially, the thoughts of the self-harm section particularly was a bit of an eye-opener for me, because of why people do it, as opposed why I thought people do it. And they're very often.
You're going to let us in on this secret?
Well, they do it because it gives them a feeling of power.
Right.
It gives them a feeling of control in many respects. A lot of people see it as attention seeking, but it isn't.
And this is where understanding that is really important. So historically, a lot of people I spent time in hospital with, particularly young women, would harm themselves, would go to an accident and emergency department and would be told they were wasting people's time.
Mm-hmm.
And that lowered their self-esteem, that made them feel worse about themselves, and actually it made them more likely to harm to go home and harm themselves.
Because it was self-inflicted.
Because it was self-inflicted. And colleagues of mine then developed the concept of safer self-harm, which on the face of it sounds odd, but actually it's about training people to understand exactly what you've articulated, and rather than effectively wag your finger at someone who's self-harm and make them feel worse about themselves, it's actually working to build their self-esteem and self-confidence so that they can think identify other ways of being more in control of their own lives that doesn't involve some of
and
the
we have to adopt a degree of acceptance and say this is how they are, this is what they're going to do, and that may be that it's fine actually.
Can I ask though, either of you really, but when I think of self-harm, I think of someone who might present in a clinic and you can see scars across their forearm because they've been eating
and it often is.
But there must be other things that people do which may be a little bit more subtle and a bit more difficult to spot.
Yes, cutting's one of the most usual ways of doing it.
And is it usually the arm, or could it be something more discreet where you're less likely to see it?
It can be a thigh. Again, I've not got huge experience in this, but one of the ladies there was a lady came in on the course who'd been self-harming for 30 odd years, and she was very candid about it, and she was talking about it, and she did have masses of scars, and she says that the looks and the comments that she gets sometimes when she's out and about in the shops and things, quite awful really. But burning, pulling her hair, swallowing things, that's not an obvious one, of course.
But again, it's really complicated because there are a lot of behaviours that people engage in that are effectively self-harming, and a lot of them just don't get termed in that way. So some people, we tend to attach that diagnosis particularly to young women, whereas a young man who gets tanked up and starts provoking fights, that is in effect self-harming behaviour.
Smoking.
Yeah, smoking.
Smoking is self-harm. It's just by degree, isn't it?
Exactly, and so understanding motivation and understanding how to respond to that is really important.